I'm using GA. Oop, haha. I don't think anything that we're covering today is non-GA or like anyone could that we can access, but just always Salesforce forward-looking statement. So as Gilda said, today we're going to cover how to integrate MCE and Agentforce. So I want to spend a little bit of time about the integrated teams as well as the actual technology. And so who am I? I'm Christopher Erslinger. I'm a senior technical lead of the AI practice at ListenGauge. I had an interesting journey into marketing technologies. I actually started my career off as a particle physicist. I was working at the Large Hadron Collider doing particle physics experimentation, large data sets, terabytes of data, large processing, lots of fun stuff there. And actually moved from particle physics into marketing technology, where I've been working in the Salesforce ecosystem for about the last 10 years. For most of the last 3-4 years at this point, I had been focusing on MCP and some of the other Einstein tools. I've joked before, my good friend Pratik, who pulled me into the ecosystem, kind of tricked me by moving from Einstein particle physics to Einstein Salesforce's AI tools. But I've been mostly focusing on marketing cloud personalization, where we've been doing the machine learning, next best actions, and using that AI functionality. Was very excited to jump into the LLM space and working towards the agentic solutions when Agentforce was announced last year. Real fun quote that we saw the other day when kind of just looking at some stuff that Salesforce was putting out. With great power comes great responsibility, and that responsibility comes in the form of security and privacy. This battles between data protection and business objectives. It's not new. Most of us are very used to balancing speed and cool new technology with safety. So just wanted to that felt really relevant to what we're talking about today, where we're talking about integrating cross platforms, moving fast, presenting AI information to AI. So I wanted that to be a little bit top of mind. Such a good quote coming out of Salesforce. Figured I'd bring that up just to start off. So from a really high level, starting at 0, what is an integration? So an integration is, but when we talk about integration, it means that we're creating a connection between a Salesforce instance and another database or system. And those connections can be inbound, outbound, bidirectional, which means they go both inbound and outbound simultaneously. And you may be connecting to another database, other Salesforce instances, or cloud-based data sources. So why would we do this? Well, that helps us actually create that 360 view of a customer, and getting all of the pieces of information that your company is collecting, bringing it all together actually paints that full picture and allows us to actually do stuff that's relevant to that user. Get that true personalization, activate on all of the information you have, don't have it be siloed. And so agents having the ability to process large groups of information, combine things, allow us to unlock that 360 view in ways that we weren't able to do before. So, is this actually something that people care about? Well, there's been some studies that show 92% of companies plan on investing more in AI in the next 3 years. 7 out of 10 marketers expect generative AI will help them do more work, get rid of busy work, and focus on actual strategic thinking. So when we dive into a new integration, what do we have to think about? So the big question there, integrations are talking about moving data around. It's not just what data, but what data do we actually need? Is this data, where is that data located? What's the sources involved? And what is the best way to actually bring that data in? Is there other ways of getting it? Are we already passing it around? These are lots of questions that Data Cloud is really good at solving. But today we're not going to be talking about Data Cloud. Today we're going to focus solely on the space of MCE and agents. But when you are moving that data around, when you are creating integrations, we do want to talk about making sure that we are planning out this thoughtfully and making sure we create those guardrails and structures. And so make sure we're considering what data is included, what's going to overwrite what, how often that data is going to be refreshed, what type of security do we have as we move across those two different platforms and stuff like that. And thinking about these things before we start help us actually be successful in the long run. So specifically diving into integrating with MCE, agents with MCE. So why would we want to do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons why we, the work the juice is going to be worth the squeeze, right? So, you know, it's going to vary depending on what your actual goals are, but there's lots of reasons why you'd want to do this. And, you know, examples like marketing campaign optimization, content generation, staff augmentation, team collaboration are all really great reasons. So, you know, touching on that last one, it's examples of we're building agents are on Sales and Service Cloud. Having access to Service Cloud does not mean you have access to MCE. So unlocking those users that don't have access to MCE, staff augmentation, where we allow our employees to do more with the resources as we give them better tools to do their job. And then, you know, being able to pump out new content, being able to organize things better, all that fun stuff. So I really hope a lot of you had the opportunity to see day one of this series for this phase 3 that we're working through, because Ali did an amazing job. He covered a lot of stuff related around setting up how can I send emails, how can I send journeys inside of Salesforce that are connected to MCE via agents. And so being able to talk to your agent and create new emails and all that fun stuff. And what he did there was he did this setup where set up an installed package, and then he integrated the APIs of MCE with Salesforce, allowing you to make API calls using Apex classes to go in and make changes inside of MCE. But the REST APIs that we have are not the only way that we can go in and remotely access data inside of MCE. There is another option, code resources. So anyone that's worked on the MCE stack should be very familiar with Cloud Pages. And Cloud Pages are remote pages that we actually can display content that can reference data inside of MCE. Super useful, collecting forms, pushing data, rendering stuff, lots of use cases, awesome stuff. Now, we don't want to display an HTML page. We don't want an external link. But one of the components of Cloud Pages are code resources. And code resources are JavaScript files that can run server-side and AMP script to process information and pull out information from your MCE instance. A really nice luxury of that is that code resources, because they don't render a page, actually have no cost associated with them. So we're not using super messages here because we're not using the actual Cloud Page, just the code resource. So there's no cost associated with this, and it allows us to actually quickly go in and access that. So instead of having to set up an install package and getting the tokens of access and all that fun stuff, all we have to do is just make sure that that remote site is accessible inside of Salesforce. And so I won't show this specifically, but all you're doing is going to the remote site details, adding that remote site URL, and making sure that it's active. And once that's done, you can have an Apex class call a code resource, and that code resource can then send back information to that Apex class, and we can have that data be pushed to the agent. And so I'm going to show a couple of resources on how you can do some small actions, and we'll dive in how this actually gets integrated to the agent, and then we'll go a little bit farther than that. And so, there we go, went backwards, sorry. Again, that flow, setting up a code resource and an Apex, aligning it to a flow or a prompt template, and then setting up topic, and then building that topic and that action inside of the agent. And so I'll walk through each of those steps inside of the tool itself, so you can actually see what this looks like. So I'm going to switch over to, first off, Marketing Cloud. I want to show you that I just have a demo org of Marketing Cloud set up here. We have a couple data extensions, a couple pieces of information just kind of to play around with. It's not a full instance, all the fun stuff, but we have a couple data extensions. Yeah, we have customer segments with a little bit of data, a couple different subscriber keys. We have some campaigns, we have some journeys, all this information just kind of sitting here. And then the other thing I wanted to show you is we have a couple code resources built. So we have two simple code resources here where we do one, a partial name data extension search. And so I'm not going to take this as a technical deep dive, so we're not going to do a full code review here now. But just a vague high level of this is this code resource is set up so that if an HTTP request comes from it with a payload, it takes that payload, it does some actions inside of MCE, and then it pushes back that response. And so we can see it's validating that it has a specific payload, and then it's doing some stuff inside of the with server-side calls into the different data extensions, and then we're sending back a response. We're also doing some error handling, all that fun stuff. So I could also look at this one where we're actually pulling information if we specify a data extension, a field, and a field name that we're looking at. So we have this set up, and how is the agent actually going to take advantage of this? So if I go over to Salesforce and I look at Apex classes, we can see some examples of those Apex classes. So if I just kind of take a look at so search data by partial name, all this is a simple Apex class that is sending a payload to a specific URL with an invocable variable for a search for string, and the expected response is the status, the message, and the data. And so we're just doing an input and we're doing an output, and we're posting that to the code resource. So if you set this Apex class up, if you had the code resource, and you've done the whitelisting for the specific domain of your cloud page, you can then start using these in flows. And so if we take a look at that same thing, I have a flow here.
Ceremony was 7:30, and the first group teed off at 7:40.
Very straightforward. Sorry. Chris,
no,
there you go. All good. So we have a very simple flow here, right? We have a couple inputs and outputs here, but it's mostly just I am hitting that Apex class, I am specifying a search for, I am hard coding a URL to that page, that cloud page, and then I am expecting 3 outputs. So for each of these steps, all we did was we just built a variable for each. So the making sure that the data is available for output, the message is available for output, and the search for is available for input, and the status is available for output. And so those inputs and outputs are the inputs from the agent, and the outputs that get sent back to the agent. We make sure that those are set up inside the flows. We just, however you design your Apex class to go in to request that information from the code resource would depend on what your outputs are and what your expected inputs are. So we have this flow. We could, test it here, and we could kind of just search for like email. So we know this is supposed to come back with responses of data extensions that have that. And so we can see here that we filled that information out, and there actually was a response, and it was with customer key and the name of the data extension being the same as the customer key of the data extension. So glad that works here. You can see it working inside the flow. If we ran into issues here, we could debug it and make sure that this information is flowing through, no pun intended on the name of the product, but make sure everything works there. And then we know that this is working inside the flow. So now that we have this as a flow, we need to set that flow to be able to be used by an agent. And so the way that we do that is we create it as an agent action. And so if I go to Agentforce assets, we have our collections of topics and actions for the agent. As most of you guys already know, topics are the kind of directions and list of instructions for an agent, and actions are the individual things that it can actually do based off of those topics. So if I navigate over to actions here, and I'll do just kind of search by that, I can find an agent action that I've created for this. And so this was very straightforward. There was not a lot of building here for this. I actually can just do it in real time right now. We can recreate that same. So I go back to agent assets. So I can navigate here. I can just say, okay, I want a new flow referenced action, and search data section by the partial names is the name of the flow. It auto pre-fills a label and an action. And then we're given what are the agent action instructions for this specific agent action. We can give it options. We have the option of showing a loading text and choosing what that text is. And then for each of the inputs and outputs that are associated with that flow, we are given a couple list of options. Instructions are how we tell the agent what each of these inputs are for or outputs are for and how it should use it. And then we're given the options of requiring that input. Should it need to collect all of those? Should it have a value for this or not? Is it required? And then as well as, should it collect this piece of information directly from the user? So it asks the user for that piece of information, or should it just get it from the context and it create it itself? And then for each of the outputs, we have the same thing. We just have to make sure that we give an instruction for each of those things. As well as we have show in the conversation, which makes you're telling the agent that it is important to send that information back to the user, or it might be just information that the agent just needs to be aware of, but isn't directly regurgitated back to the agent, to the person interacting with the agent. So once we've built that agent action, we can then associate it to a topic and we can actually use it. So if I go into agents, I have a simple agent that's already been created for this case. And we'll open the builder and we can test it inside of the agent builder. So this is your way to test your agents before you actually put them into the real world. And we can modify instructions in real time. So you can test it. Don't like the behavior, we manipulate the instructions, we mold it into being the person we want. This is a part where it is a little bit more art than science, where you're changing those prompts and engineering it to behave the way you want it to. The way that we've been thinking about this as we've been going through is this is you training your new employee. So your agent is your new employee at your company. They're not going to just exactly behave the way that you expect them to. They need to be like educated. You have to give them instruction. They have to learn how to do it. You need to give them feedback. And so that is what this process of adding instructions is going to be and go through. So if I look at the topic MCE data insights, I have some description, some scope, instructions that I've previously set up for it. And we have two actions that are set up, get records with prompt and search data extensions by partial name. So when you talk to an agent, the flow that it goes through is it says, okay, this is what the user asks. Which of the topics should which of the topics is this, question going to be relevant to? And it tries to pick a topic. And then once it's picked a topic, it ingests all the instructions of that specific topic and says, okay, which actions in that topic should I use? And so if I ask it a question that it falls into this topic, it will then have these instructions to work with, and it will choose one of these actions to perform. And so I can say, finding a E that starts with, and so based off of that, it should choose one of the actions that are corresponding, and the one for search data extension by partial name is what we expect it to use. And so it's taking a minute to decide what it wants to do. It's taking a little longer. Well, it got confused by DE, but it is asking an extra piece of decision. So that is something that we would improve on, and we'd make sure that we have that context added as instructions, but it is capable of just asking for clarification and then the next step going through. So when we're looking for, okay, so it's clearly the instructions that I have for this, it's not picking it up, and that's okay. So what we would just do is we would just make a change in the instructions to actually have something for that. And we can do something like when a user asks to find a DE, look up that DE using and we'll just reference directly the name of that instruction. And so that wasn't going very well, but if we try it again, refresh, see how that handles now that it has that additional instruction. And moment of truth. Okay, well, something went wrong. Well, we can take a look here and we can see that the question was considered ambiguous. And so my instructions were not actually triggering the specific instruction that I was looking for. And so we can do is we can make sure that that actually picks up questions specifically to do that. And so let's see if we can make that actually just happen in real time. I wasn't planning on spending too much time troubleshooting this. That was before, but that is okay. This is part of that. I do want to touch on this a little bit. Well, I think we have the time to play around just a little bit. Including. So I just changed the scope and try that again. And so as you're building this out, you probably would want to go through this a little more thoroughly and flush out explicit instructions. You have the ability to also add to this, besides instructions, you can add, I can't do it while it's doing this, but you can add examples of when you'd expect it to use those actions. And so these struggles that I'm having right here, this is fun. Can you please provide more details on what you're looking for? Are you searching for specific topic? Okay, so I think that's the out of the box additional things that I have added. It's confusing. It doesn't actually know what direction it is. So I'm just going to scale back some of these things. Having fun. And so these came out of the box with the agent. I never actually set them up, and that is my bad. So because it has additional topics that it's trying to consider, it's having a hard time understanding which one those are. It's not a limitation of the tool. It's just that my demo was not fully set up. I apologize about that. There we go. And so thank you for coming along on this journey. But what we can see is that search for data extension by partial name was actually chosen. So we can see here before, it wasn't sure which action to actually take. Part of that was just the instructions and the scopes of those things. But now that it actually understood which topic to take, it chose a topic. Based off of that, it had a list of instructions and a list of actions. The action that actually moved here was search for email. We got an outlook response. It then grounded that and summarized it, and then gave us that information. And so we can see inside of MCE that that data extension does exist. That is the values for it. And so that was a little bit of a bumpy ride, but it does show you kind of what the steps it takes to actually make something like that work. But I wanted to kind of do a simple showing of that. But that was kind of the very basic. I'm asking for a query. It's bringing that information. It's regurgitating that back in. Let's say you want the agent to actually think about the data that you're working with. And so we have a way of doing that for Agentforce. That is RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, where you feed it context and then prompt it to understand that context. So when we combine retrieving data from MCE with some type of prompt template, we are able to then craft a response that is a summary or some type of filter or analyze that data and make it actually make decisions, take advantage of the AI's intelligence to do actions with that data besides just regurgitating that back. And so in the first part of the series, Jacob Hayes and I did a technical overview where we talked about RAG in more detail. In that case, we were focusing mostly on the RAG capabilities of Agentforce as a whole. When you have your data stored on Data Cloud and you actually are chunking your data, so you can do this with unstructured data, you can do this with that. But we have a source of data for agents that we can use that doesn't require that data to be loaded onto Data Cloud, but rather just have that data be brought in to the context when we're actually trying to produce that prompt. And so instead of doing this offline preparation of loading, chunking, vectorizing, and indexing, we could just set up a method to pass that information directly into the prompt to have the augmented prompt and use that information in a context of a prompt. And so what would that look like? I'll switch back over to the tool and I will switch over to prompt templates. So prompt builder hopefully you guys are familiar with. Really awesome tool that you have access to inside of the Salesforce ecosystem, where you can push information from your Salesforce tool system and then create a response off of that. Really awesome for creating summaries or creating emails. Lots of functionality. It's also how answer knowledge questions works with an agent when you are using RAG and uploading your customer data or your brand's data and having that work. And so that took a little time to load, but that's okay. So we can look at this example that I put together real quick, where we are building a prompt template and we're kind of recreating that structure of what answer knowledge uses, but instead of using a retriever that pulls information off of Data Cloud, we will just pull information directly off of MCE. And so in that similar vein, where we have some basic instructions, we have the section for knowledge, and then what the question we're actually asking that data to be, and then build a response off of that. So here would be a way that you could really fine tune and you do different things and actually be able to collect that information, summarize it, tell it explicit instructions, and manipulate or groom that data before it even comes into the agent, and only bring in the relevant stuff to not overwhelm the agent, and also just to have a cleaner UI, UX, to be able to just show the information that is relevant, already summarized, ready to go. And so when you're playing around in here, you can do testing in here, and you can test with a query, you can test with chunks. But if we want to put this in front of the agent, we want to get data from MCE. And so we can go back to flows, and we can take a look at a different flow that I've created, search data extensions. Oops, that's the same one. Go back. Get records with prompt. And so here, doing the same type of method, we can do a Apex class that instead of just saying a query string and then producing a response, looking up data extensions based off of that, this is give me a data extension, give me a field name, give me a field value, give me all of the records that are assigned with that. And so if we did that for instance, maybe our customer segment section, we have subscriber key as a partial primary key in this, so we have the possibility for multiple results of the same user to come up. And so this is just some simple dummy data thrown together real quick. But sub 12 is some user. They are a part of multiple segments potentially. Let's get a full overview of that user. I could write a query in here, or I could actually ask the agent to build that. And you can think of use cases where we take that information and we ask it like, what type of user is this person? And so your sales rep would be able to quickly check against all of your segments and summarize them and give you overviews, and you can create strategies off of that. So if we switch back to the flow, in the same way we were doing before, data in, data out, we're going to pass those field names and field values in a message. But now we want to take the field names and field values that come back from that, the list of those, and we want to combine that information and then drop it into the template. So here we can do fun thing in flows. You can use a text template, and I can combine all of my output names and all of my output values into one variable inside of this, which then can just be passed into that prompt template. And so the prompt template, as we saw before, has the input of chunks and the input of query. So the query is just a input that we're from this flow, which means it's coming from the agent. And we already know how the combined information is coming from. That's coming from the MCE based off of the response from that Apex call. And that allows us to actually have that agent's response not be the response from the Apex class, but rather from the prompt template. And so let's take a look at that here. And so we could ask it something like, what segments is sub 12 in the data extension? Customer segments. So instead of me typing this out, I'm just going to copy and paste. And so I'm just going to make this a little bit more straightforward. So 12, just make sure that I don't. Oh. subscriber key. And so I'm not doing the same camel case. We'll just make sure that it should be able to pick that up. Let's see what that does. So much better than the last time, but so we can see it picked up the right topic. It then passed it to the get records with prompts. It correctly identified the field name, the query, the field value, and the customer key. And then we can see in the outputs, there is the outputs from what came from the Apex class, but then there is the summary that the agent actually got put together from that prompt template. And so that was a really straightforward one. It's part of two different segments, low engagement, high value. And we could then craft that prompt template and kind of add more context, give it more instructions, tell it like users who are this and this should be falling into this. We can add that context and have it build out responses. Lots of stuff that we can do with that. So when we combine prompt templates and calls to an MCE, your limitations are just on the complexity of the flows that you create. So lots of cool things that we could do with that, such as personalized customer journeys, actually doing data insights from MCE, automate journey building, which was stuff that we kind of saw before, and just kind of playing around with your data and actually playing around with AI's ability to summarize data and play around and do that stuff. Now, one limitation of this route is the expectation is that your data will fit inside of a prompt template. Prompt templates are not made for millions of records to be analyzed all at once. It's expecting this to examine the needle in the haystack, not the haystack as altogether. If we're trying to do analytics on the haystack, we would want to bring our data into Data Cloud and then use Data Cloud to actually manipulate that. But if we're talking about individual users and we're looking for analytics or responses on that stuff, we don't have to bring everything in. We can just bring in the context of that one user at that time and have the agent play around with, or help us supplement what information we have available to us. So a couple of takeaways from this. We have integration. It isn't just data, it's the people that are working on it as well. We want to make sure that every part of the integration that we're working on is thought out. What is the specific data? What is the use case? What are those people going to do with it? How does this help them unlock new abilities that they haven't done previously? How does this streamline someone's work to save time, actually make it worthwhile to do, and prove that investment by improving people's day-to-day? Code resources and Apex classes can be a great first step. The lift to get that stood up is very small, especially if you're working on very narrow use cases. And then you can expand, you can add complexity to your code resource, you can add complexity to your prompts, to your flows, to the agent instructions. And then a final takeaway from this is don't forget to ask why, right? Like, why are we doing this? What is the value that we're going to get out of it? Where are we going to see gains? And why is this investment actually valid? So that was the general coverage of that. I would love to help with feedback and questions on that. Yeah, cool.
Christopher, that was amazing. Thank you so very much for going through it. I know we have folks that would love to kind of jump in and ask some questions. What I am going to do is I am going to unmute. That way, we can invite some folks up to the stage to ask questions if that works. And while I do that, Christopher, I don't know if you want to go through and see what questions that people are posting.
Yep, I'm pulling that up now. I didn't have it up while I was presenting, but starting from the top. And I apologize.
Okay, I think participants can now unmute themselves. So if you have questions, I know some of you were asking like, how did this get set up? And then we're also seeing some folks saying, like asking, is it possible to restrict an agent's, Daniela, I don't know if you're on, is it possible to restrict an agent's access? I love conversational live Q&A. So for anybody that posted a question, we have time left if you want to raise your hand and jump in and ask. I think it's
Yeah.
Jay Osani.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
I'm butchering it right now, but please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning, again. Chris, first of all, thank you for the amazing session. My probably the only question or the first question I would say is agent can go and figure out the name for the DE, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I think often we have gone into the scenario where, like, hey, these are 100 contacts and two of them have not received the email. So is it possible that, like we can ask Agentforce that, hey, these two contacts and this is a particular email which we send them, let's say 3 days back, have they received the email? So probably I'm trying to connect the dots between the IERs and the send data view, I would say, and maybe the job data view from Marketing Cloud.
Yeah, so there's the send logs in MCE, right, where I would immediately go to, and you could query specific sections of that for the subscriber key and look at what emails have been sent to them and kind of go through that. You could look for the absence of something like that. The simple code resource that I showed today was give me a data extension, give me a field, and give me a value to look up. It gives me all of the values of that. You could very easily manipulate that to the flip of that. Give me two data extensions, find like the users who aren't in both, or something like that. And so you could have a list of people that you're expecting to send to, and then you have the actual send collection, and you could say, find me the users who are not in both. Simple. You could build that out the same way you build out a SQL query, but then you could have that be written as a code resource so that you could just have that as a capability of the agent to go in and work through.
Okay, thank you so much. This is a minor one on that. Will Agentforce export or give us probably a XSL file, Excel file, or a CSV file with the record details?
So not by default. I think when
Hmm.
you're inside of a conversation, it won't produce a CSV file that you could click to download. You could write a solution for that yourself, where the information that you wrote could be in the export of that flow. So like in the flow, we've queried that information.
Okay.
In that flow, you could add a step where you write that out. But I don't think there is no default Agentforce action for that. But yeah, so you have to custom solution that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Of
that
course.
question. Hey, John, you're up next.
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Yeah, so the initial part that you showed us of building the code on code pages to pull the data back from the API, is that something we could use Agentforce or a different generative AI tool to actually like write that part of the code?
So Agentforce itself isn't trained to do coding things. It may perform well enough since it's being backend trained by your OpenAI source, and it is a ChatGPT. How well does ChatGPT write code resources? I don't personally know. I haven't played around with it myself, but it is something that ChatGPT does do a good job of well-documented codes. It has a really good job of recreating. And so I have to imagine there is a lot of Salesforce documentation that lives out in the wild. There are a lot of GitHub repositories for these things. So I have to imagine that it does do well with server-side JavaScript, and B, the documentation for like going into a data extension is pretty well documented. So I suspect that it probably would do a pretty good job of that. I just haven't personally played around with that myself, but I think that you probably could get like 75% there with just because I do know that like LLMs do a good job of writing basic
Sure.
JavaScript, and we are talking about just like a code snippet that's 100 lines of code. So I do think it would do a good job. I just can't speak exactly on it.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you, John. Allie?
Hi there. Is it possible for your agent action to be added to the default Agentforce so that it could be live on the page within that functionality, or does it have to be within its own agent?
So any agent that you create, and so if you're talking about a service agent or a custom agent, so if you're talking about an agent that's live on a site, you're talking about using it through embedded messaging, that is a service agent usually. Service agents can use custom actions 100%, and you can add any complexity. There's no limitation to that. Any action you create in any type of agent can be used in any other type of agent. There's no cross limitations there.
Okay. And I have an SDO org, and it
Mhm.
came with an agent like a default agent, and it's really restricted in limitations. Do you know if that's just because it's in the SDO org, or if those limitations would be live in customer environments?
So when you run into issues, there's two types of issues. One, the Salesforce instance that you have does not have the proper licensings. And the other is your agent doesn't have the license provision to it. And so your typical SDO has a lot of things, but they don't give you everything. And so I believe embedded messaging is something that you don't get with SDOs. I'm not entirely confident with that, but part of your issue you might run into is that there's permissions there. And so there are certain things where you need to go in and grant access to the agent to be able to handle these cases, but it's not a limitation of the tool. It is more than likely just a limitation of what has been set up and what you have permission to work on in an SDO.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for that, Allie. So let's go through some of the questions. Can we query? Oh, I think we answered that one. Sorry about that. For this normal SFMC org is capable or need any separate licenses, the org previously shown is a normal Salesforce org. I think we answered that, correct?
Yep. So there's no limit there. There is nothing. The only functionality that you would need to do what we did today is have access to cloud pages. So if your SFMC instance has that provisioned, then you'd be able to run forward with code resources. There's nothing else added specifically about agents.
Thank you for that. And Mickey said, how did we set up the connection between SF and MCE? Is normal MC connect setup enough? And then we can just get the URL from MCE to pass the Apex flow? No name credential needed, or do we still need to set that up?
So the method that I'm doing right now circumvents needing to have a named credential. The only way that this is technically what I showed you today, this code resource, anything could query this. There is no security set up with this code resource with the demo that I did today. When we do solutions like this in actual production, you have some securities that you can add. I could wrap this entire thing in an IP whitelisting to make sure that the IP address was specifically from Salesforce. And I could also set up a secret key tokenization where we store tokens on both Salesforce and in SFMC to have a check first. And in that payload coming from the Apex class, we would make sure that that token is included. And then the code resource would then make sure that that is included in the payload. And if it's not that exact code, then you would not allow it. So you'd have to create your own security procedures there. By default, code resources just run wherever they need to. So that is the one trade-off. However, that is why this is so much faster to move on, is that there aren't all that setup procedures and stuff that has to be enabled that you probably saw if you saw Ali's call on Tuesday. Definitely suggest checking that out. You can do a little more security with that, and you can use just the REST APIs, which do use a named user and actually do the token every input request and stuff.
Thank you. That was a really good question. And for those asking, we will post Tuesday's session on the MC Learning Camp by the end of today. Mohammed had a question. Can we command the agents for SQL query as per segment criteria?
Yes, you would just have to build a code resource that does that. And so my code resource that I did for this was just a very straightforward one of the simple query of like no flexibility in that. You could expand out the functionality of your code resource to handle other types of behaviors besides get specific records at those things. So it would require a little bit of customization in your code resource. But if the inputs are capable to translate that, or just have the agent like, because the agent will write SQL and it will pass SQL to the code resource. You just need to have your code resource be flexible enough to input SQL or logic in that way and to be able to translate it. So not the way that I quickly designed this, but it is possible if you needed to have that solution.
Thank you for that. And I think that's all the questions for today. I do see some conversations happening between attendees about ChatGPT. How well is it with Apex code? I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Sorry, can you say that one more
It's
time?
just ChatGPT. There's been some conversations on how well it does with Apex code.
So I have played around with that. I have had much more success with that. That is something that I have played around with. I just happened to have been something that I played with. With Apex classes, there is definitely enough resources. All things Salesforce core are very, like all the CRM stuff, there's so much public knowledge on that LLMs actually do a very good job of that. Some of the gotchas there you do want to cover is that explaining the context that I'm using an auto, like the purpose of this is to be used in an auto-launched flow so that you get the inputs and outputs set up the correct way so that it actually will feed the information. But it has done pretty well with me playing around with it and it producing essentially what I wanted it to do on the first try. So very cool with that, and that has been a huge time saver and play around.
Thank you for that. And I think that's all for today. If anyone has any final questions, please feel free to jump in and ask Christopher. Give it a couple of minutes. All
Yeah, I
right.
guess one of my questions, quick question, and this may be a longer term roadmap question that you can't answer, but yeah, this was very much about seems like using Agentforce inside of core Salesforce. But for an organization that doesn't have core Salesforce, we just have the CDP version of Data Cloud and then Marketing Cloud engagement. Is there a solution that works similar to this? Or do we really need Agentforce inside of core?
So Agentforce only today lives, like it lives in core. There is no Agentforce inside of SFMC, inside of MCE. I can't speak to roadmap on when or how that will look. But when it comes to the actual fully customizable agents, that is currently only existing on Salesforce, right? Not SFMC or MCE. So that is currently that today. Now, this focused solely on, I don't have my data anywhere besides MCE. Can I still use an agent to, look at that data, manipulate that data? If your data from MCE is being passed to other channels like Data Cloud, if you've set up something where you're pushing data between like CRM and Salesforce already, you could pull that information from CRM, add context here. All right, we could do in this flow, it doesn't have to be just Apex class into MCE. We could also bring in data from a record, from something else here, right? Like we're in Flow Builder. Anything you could do with flows, we could bring that information in and pass that in as well as additional context. And the same thing in the prompt template, you have the ability to pull in any information from CRM. And so I think and CRM or data cloud, right? Like, so like those capabilities exist today. This was just kind of showcasing that other niche because there is nothing on SFMC that takes advantage of Agentforce, but you can still bring in that information even if it's not today set up. It's not this giant project where you have to bring all of your data in before you start using it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, John, for asking that. Once again, thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. For some of you, I know it's early morning or late at night, so we truly appreciate your support. Thanks again, Christopher. That was a really good session. And for those asking, we will post Tuesday session on the MC Learning Camp along with this session, hopefully by the end of today. If you have questions, please continue having these conversations in the MC Learning Camp. Christopher, as well as all the other presenters, will be online checking periodically. Thanks again, and don't forget to register for the other session on Tuesday, where Ali will be going over automate personalized conversations in WhatsApp. Let me post the links again for those of you who missed them right now. There you go. Looking forward to seeing all of you again next week. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.